Matchday 2 of the Champions League, and delighted to welcome Mark O'Hare, Adrian Clarke, and Miguel Delaney to the Matchbook Champions League podcast. I'm your host, Daniel Hussey. Decent start last 2 weeks ago now, it was, and with some good winners. Mark and Adrian have been flying form domestically. The guys will be back on Thursday. But today we will be focusing on the Champions League action, and we're going to get straight into the four games we are going to cover: Napoli versus Real Madrid, Leipzig versus Manchester City, Newcastle versus PSG, and Dortmund versus Milan. As group stage match days go, this is quite a decent one, I would say. So before we get going, a quick reminder, do hit that like button and subscribe completely for free to our YouTube channel. And if you are listening on the podcast, do leave us a preferential preview or review, apologies, and a 5-star one at that if you are enjoying the content. We'll get straight into it. Napoli versus Real Madrid, the Tuesday night game here. Take a look at the betting that we currently have on matchbook.com. You can back Napoli 2.74, Madrid slight favourites at 2.7. The draw is 3.7. Both teams to score in this is favoured, yes, at 1.63. No is 2.38. The Asian handicap line is a draw no bet market, effectively 50-50 here. Madrid ever so slight favourites at 198. And the goal line is 2.5, shaded a good bit towards the over. So, Mark, kick us off on this one. And like for those that watch domestic football, but predominantly in England, give us a little background to how these two teams are getting on in their respective leagues and where you see this match going in terms of a bet.
I found this game quite difficult to decipher, in all honesty. I would probably have been keen to oppose Napoli, but credit to them, they've kind of wiped away any suggestions of a crisis by kind of thrashing in form Lecce away from home, and I can't remember who they beat in the week previous, but that was a potential banana skin at the weekend, and Rudy Garcia made a few changes, which included leaving Osimhen off on the bench from the off. They had Leo Ostergaard and Nathan making their second start together at the centre half due to injuries to Juan Jesus and Ramrani as well. So they came through it with flying colours. Obviously, they lost Spalletti in the summer. Rudy Garcia has taken over, which was kind of a surprise decision. We expected them to potentially have a bit of a Scudetto hangover, and I think that has been the case so far this season. But, I guess what's been dogging them in the last week or so is the controversy surrounding Osimhen and the social media tweets, which I'm sure you've all seen, just puzzling and baffling as to why they went down that route. But I wouldn't say it's a happy camp at the minute. I wouldn't say they're the same side as 12 months ago, far from it, actually. But, there's similar vibes, but the performances have been quite erratic, actually. And but I guess you'd say this is Champions League on a Tuesday night against one of the best teams in the world. There will be an atmosphere at the San Paolo, and they're already outsiders to win this game very slightly, obviously. But I probably wouldn't be keen on opposing them because the market is already in favour of Real Madrid, who haven't exactly brought the house down themselves. They beat Girona in the sort of top of the table clash at the weekend to go top now in Spain themselves. The scoreline looks good on the surface of it, but the first 20 minutes or 30 minutes, Girona had them on the ropes and kind of put them under huge pressure. The final score does look a little bit kind and generous. They're still trying to find out themselves, really, though. Obviously, they lost Benzema in the summer, and the new look team, Modric being phased out, Bellingham coming in and playing a star role. But it doesn't seem to have worked just yet. Vinicius is just coming back from injury. Rodrigo hasn't been in sort of goal-scoring form. Josulu's actually been leading the line quite well, actually. He's the kind of guy who's kind of knitting it all together at the minute. So still uncertainty around Real Madrid, particularly going forward. And defensively, they're going into this game with Alaba out, Militao's long-term injury as well. So Nacho will start again at centre-back. He had a horrendous challenge at the weekend. He'll be banned for a few weeks for that. But he's available here. And Fran Garcia will probably come in at left-back too. But again, you've got Courtois missing too. Probably one of the best shot-stoppers in the world, if not the best. So defensively, they are weaker. I would say Napoli are weaker too. So neither team are probably the same animals we saw 12 months ago. And I think there is ability at the top end of the pitch for both of these two teams to hurt each other. So I find it quite hard to split them as the market does. So I'm not going to go there. I'm actually going to back goals in this game, over 2.5 goals in BTTS at 195. I see over 2.5 on its own is 175. But I do think both can oblige. If you look at Real Madrid's underlying numbers, they are allowing over 1 expected goal per game in La Liga already this season, despite the schedule being passable. And Napoli's defensive numbers might look good, but their schedule has been kind in Italy. So, Real Madrid will not be intimidated by this atmosphere. Vinicius getting a game under his belt at the weekend is big. I'm interested to see which side or what system Ancelotti goes with here, but I expect them to score in Naples, but obviously you'd always back Napoli to oblige as well. in front of their home supporters, and I'm just looking for a third goal. So hoping for goals in this game purely because I can't back either team at the prices or handicaps.
Okay, yeah, goals, angles, the plays for Mark O'Hare in that game. And Miguel, over to you and a little bit on Real Madrid and particularly Jude Bellingham. Obviously, it just seems every week those on Twitter on Saturday night we'll see highlights of a last-minute goal from Jude Bellingham. We saw it in the opening group stage game, but it's more than that, isn't it? He's just been a leader in that Real Madrid midfield in the first 8 games this season.
Well, he's living the dream, isn't it? There's probably no other way to put it. His age, the fact you could see when, and this is why he joined the club, he's clearly someone who relishes actually playing for a giant like that to a greater degree than almost anyone I've ever seen in that sense. So he's kind of loving just the atmosphere in Madrid, and to kind of be, and this is no doubt a factor in his performance as well, to be kind of complementing that then with being the match winner almost every week. Obviously, his actual performance level does point to actually an issue in the team right now. This is nothing against Bellingham. It's more that he is obviously essentially compensating for the lack of an absolutely top forward. And he has been playing close to the goal. I mean, I was speaking to someone from around the Madrid camp who was saying like they're close to putting him in the Benzema position. But it has meant that kind of goal threat they have hasn't been diminished. At the same time, there is still that sense. I mean, this is essentially a Real Madrid now who aren't complete and won't be basically until they do what everyone in football expects and sign Mbappe, and that'll be the true start of the next Madrid era. So for the moment, he just, and we've seen this in some of the league results, particularly the defeat to Atletico Madrid last week. There's maybe that slight sense of vulnerability. Maybe going slightly against the grain here. I think this will be a high-scoring game, but because of that, and because of Napoli, I think, as Mark has spoken about there, they have rallied. I thought they were going to be in store for one of those seasons you sometimes see after a team wins a title, where having had that kind of a massive emotional outpouring to just a collapse afterwards, especially when the manager goes. That hasn't happened yet. In fact, as we say, they rallied from results. They'll be up for this. It's a huge Champions League game. And just, I know it's quite high priced in that sense, but the draw kept jumping out at me. I think it's one of those games where it'll be back and forth and there'll be goals. I think they'll balance each other out, though.
Okay, yeah. 3.7 does seem quite a decent price if those two teams are around the same level right now, given the circumstances. Adrian, over to you on this one. Real Madrid away to Napoli. You are leaning to them in the Madrid that is in the draw on bet market.
Yeah, I won the insurance policy. I don't think this is nothing will be guaranteed in this game. That is for sure. But I never want to oppose Real Madrid in the Champions League. It's as simple as that. This is their competition. They tend to raise their game in it. And yeah, even though Napoli have improved in terms of their results, haven't really played anyone of great substance as yet. They scrambled past Braga on the last match day as well. The Osimhen issue is going to be bad for the dressing room. Behind the scenes, there's going to be problems there that could manifest themselves against top opponents, where everyone starts to look at one another and think, well, what's going on here, boys? So yeah, look, I take all the points that the lads have said. Real Madrid aren't exactly ripping up La Liga and playing a swashbuckling brand of football at the moment. It's a sort of narrow 4-4-2 diamond with Joselu plus Rodrigo, but I think that Vinicius Junior he'll be fit and available for this one, so it'll be interesting to see what they do, how they tweak it. But yeah, I just think that Napoli are weaker than they were last year. Real Madrid obviously a little bit weaker, but this is Real Madrid. It's still Ancelotti. It's still Jude Bellingham. You look at the names on that team sheet, Vinicius and Rodrigo, and I just think they've got it within themselves to certainly score at least one. They've scored in 8 of their last 9 away games in the Champions League. The only exception was that Manchester City battering at the Etihad. They've scored in every match this season in all competitions. That's 9 games. I think they can score again here, and maybe twice. So for that reason, even though it could be a draw, I would see it. I'd see it being a 2-2 draw. If anything. Yeah. So I'm going to go with Real Madrid draw no bet. So we get our money back if it is level.
It's funny you say 2-2. 2-0 will get 2 wins and a push from 3 guys' selections, even though they're 3 completely different angles, which I thought was quite fun. I'm happy to sit this one out, and I think this will be a watching brief for me. But look, the draw 3.7 is maybe a fun one to get involved with. But that's over 2.5 on both teams to score for Mark at 195. Madrid drawn about 198 for Adrian, and 3.7 Miguel is the draw. We'll go to the second game here, Leipzig versus Manchester City, and this was already a big game before the weekend's results here, respectively. We'll take a look at the betting that we currently have on the matchbook betting exchange, and Leipzig are getting backed into 4.9, Man City 1.76, and the draw is 4.3. Both teams to score, yes, again, is very low at 1.62. The Asian handicap line, Leipzig are getting a 3/4 of a goal head start at even money, and the goal line here, 2.5, favoured heavily on the overs at 1.65. So, yeah, Adrian, take it away. It was obviously a big, interesting weekend at the top of the table from Premier League for the top of the Premier League in terms of results. I thought the Wolves City game, just from what I've seen of the game on Matchday and stuff, that it was a little bit more than the Rodri missing factor, and it just seemed to be a pretty poor enough performance from Man City, and particularly from Erling Haaland. I think Craig Dawson had him in his pocket, judging by some of the analysis on Matchday.
He can dine out on that one for a few years, can't he?
Why not?
Look, we've got to grab these moments when they come and enjoy them as non-Manchester City fans, haven't we? Because it's good for the league. It's good, it's good that they've shown vulnerabilities, I guess. Good for everybody else, of course, not so much for them. But yeah, look, any kind of blip is not going to last long, no doubt about that. Of course, they did lose against Newcastle the previous match in the Carabao Cup as well. And the thing is with City at the moment, they're a bit stretched. You see, young players coming off the bench at the weekend. That bench isn't anywhere near as strong as it has been. And of course, that means that he hasn't got as much license to rest and rotate ahead of the Arsenal game at the weekend. And it's a tough game, isn't it? Leipzig away is it's their hardest game in the group stage, you'd have to say. So he's going to have to play most of the big guns here. And Leipzig are doing all right, aren't they? Considering they've lost a lot of players in the summer. But the weekend, 2-0 up, blasted Bayern off the pitch for a bit. And then eventually they had to settle for a point. But the new players are doing okay, doing very well, actually. Openda, Simon, Benjamin Sesko, they're all in decent nick at the moment. So they'll relish this. And of course, the club itself, even though a lot of the players weren't there last year, the club will still be hurting from that 7-0 at the hands of Manchester City at the Etihad. So I think there'll be a real determination on the German team's part to prey on any possible weakness in the City side. And they'll be on the counter. And I think that Leipzig are a better team on the counter. They did beat Real Madrid last year and drew with Manchester City in this fixture in the group stage last year, or in the knockouts. I can't remember when it was, but they had them at home and drew the game. So yeah, I think they've got it within themselves to make this a competitive match. I really do. And some of the stats around City in the Champions League are quite odd. Quite frankly, they are the holders. They won the Champions League last year, but away from home, they won 1 and drew 5 last season. I mean, it's easy to forget that. They drew 5 of 6 away games in the competition. The last 5 matches on the road in the Champions League have been under 2.5 goals. So to see Leipzig +1, so you need City to win by 2 goals to lose our money, that appeals to me. And I know it's dangerous to play to go on the handicap against Manchester City, but yeah, I just think at the moment, slightly wounded, big motivation for Leipzig, and with that backstory of not really turning it on away from home in the Champions League, then this is something that I'm definitely interested in. So yeah, 1.74 Leipzig +1. Okay,
+1 gives you plenty of insurances there. Yeah, I remember watching Copenhagen get a 0-0 draw at home in the group stage this time last year. Miguel, Adrian just alluded to the couple of recent results from Man City. It is in the middle of 4 away games in 11 days, culminating obviously in Arsenal away. But then there's also a tougher run of fixtures versus what they had in the first 6 games, and then a break as they play the Club World Final. What I'm getting at is this as crucial a 2-month period of any part of the season for Pep Guardiola's side?
I wouldn't say crucial, given that, as we've seen last season, no matter who they're playing, especially in last season's Champions League run, they can just go on a run. I think it's probably crucial to the competitiveness of the Premier League and the idea of a Premier League title race, as well as maybe the feeling that someone else can win the Champions League this season. Because I have to say, I'm not too convinced with the rest of the field, even like Bayern Munich, who had been considered maybe the team closest to City. Well, they were pretty unconvincing against City's opponents, Leipzig, at the weekend. And I suppose, what's interesting about this game is a few months ago, obviously, City absolutely destroyed Leipzig. You would almost have been thinking that it would be similar, but things have shifted. I think City are potentially in one of those periods, because even though, let's not forget, the defeat to Wolves the weekend, it prevented them having a 100% record from the first 7 games. So let's not overlook that. That said, there'd been a certain vulnerability to some of the performances, even when they ended up thrashing Fulham. Before they kind of ran away in all those games, there was almost a sense that they could be got at. And maybe that's the general feeling at the moment. And I think Leipzig will fancy that. They were better in the home game last season. And just for all those reasons, and despite Rodri being able to play in this game, I think this will be a high-scoring game. And I'm going for what is a very kind of attractively framed over 3.5 goals. I think this could be anything from a 2-2 to a 3-1. I think it will be open.
Okay, 2.4, the over 3.5 goals for Miguel Delaney. And Mark, a little bit on Leipzig here. Your best long shot was very harshly done, I thought, over the weekend. 2-0 up against Bayern. Bayern got it back to 2-2, and you were saying there off air that Leipzig had their chances to possibly win the game 3-2, but they've been very impressive this season, particularly in those 2 games against Bayern Munich.
Yeah, they've also played Bayer Leverkusen as well, who are the early league leaders, so they haven't had it easy in the Bundesliga. Yeah, they've scored 16 goals in 6 games, which is a club record at this stage of the season. They're feeling very good about themselves, as Adrian suggested at the start. You know, they've had a lot of turnover of playing personnel in the summer to where they are now, and I'm quite surprised at how good they have been from the off, really. And what the guys have said is absolutely true. You know, they all fancy an element of revenge here. Everyone keeps talking about the mauling they took at the Etihad, but everyone kind of overlooks the fact that the first leg did end in a draw. Leipzig were more than good enough for that draw. Probably could have even got more actually out of that game. They had City on the ropes at key periods of that fixture. So there'll be a bullish confidence about them, a bullish kind of mindset of revenge too. But yeah, obviously opposing City comes with fraught danger, really. But I think if you look at their more recent performances, they've now conceded first in 4 of the last 5 games. And what we saw at the weekend was Leipzig flying into a 2-0 lead against Bayern. They did run out of gas a little bit in the second half, and that's a slight concern, really. They did look a little bit tired and weary during that second period. But, you know, their home record under Marco Rosa has been very, very strong domestically and abroad too. So I agree with Adrian. I think there might be an opportunity here to get Leipzig on side with a 1-goal start, you know, requiring City to win this game by 2 goals or more. That's a decent leap for a tricky away European tie, especially, as you say, with Arsenal at the weekend on the back of 2 previous away games. I think the blueprint has been there, set by Wolves and Newcastle to kind of hassle Harry, deny them space, defend as best as you can, and just hope that your forwards take their opportunities when they come. And Leipzig definitely do have not just 1 or 2, but a glut of forwards who can take their opportunities. They're all in great form. Xavi Simons has been in outstanding form since moving across from the Eredivisie. And I know Rodri is back, and that does make City a different animal. But if you look at Leipzig's records, you know, they beat Real Madrid at this stage last season. They held Manchester City in the previous year. They beat City. I know it was a dead rubber. They did beat them here. They held PSG 2-2 as well. They almost always score at home in the Champions League, quite often score twice or more as well. So if they can get on the score sheet here, City need 3 goals to see this bet lose. And I think whilst it's possible, I think we might see a closer game than perhaps the odds suggest.
Okay, Leipzig plus 1.0 on the Asian handicap line. We'll lock that in as a bet, given it's the selection of Mark and Adrian's. Miguel is over 3.5 goals at 2.4. There's shouts in the comments for very similar selections here, guys. So there's a lot of group thinking going on in this community here. So let's look for a bit of different opinions and see if we land on the right results here. So Newcastle PSG, probably the standout tie, I guess, of the Champions League this week. We'll take a look at the betting that we have on matchbook.com. You can currently back Newcastle at 262, PSG underdogs in this game at 278 or 276 now. The draw is 3.75. Both teams to score, yes. Again, 1.58 featured this season, as we keep saying. Asian handicap line is draw no bet, so Newcastle slight favourites here at around 193, and the goal line is 2.5, and that's 169 for the over. So Miguel, take it away on this one. I'm not sure if you're heading to this game or not, but look, leaving all stuff aside off the pitch, for Newcastle fans to have Champions League football back for the first time since 2002-2003 season, it's going to be some atmosphere in St James's Park.
I was supposed to be going with a train strike. So, and
do you have a replacement game, Miguel, now, or are you?
Sorry?
Well,
we were down for and I suppose we were waiting to see if it might be kind of postponed. I do wonder whether that might affect attendance, but then Newcastle, obviously, a lot of it's very local fan base, and it will be, I suppose, rocking. Again, like this is a geopolitical derby, given the owners of two clubs, and the whatever about football rivalry. The rivalry between the states, I mean, it had framed or influenced genuine political issues like the Gulf blockade over the past 10 years. And that, I mean, it's not an exaggeration to say that has influenced football decisions. Because PSG, basically, they've been looking at what their other kind of state-owned rivals do, and which is why they basically it's one reason they have this stripped-down team now. They realize the kind of the big star project didn't work. And I think they go to Newcastle with a very different sort of side, a really stripped down team, and the one Luis Enrique will expect to do some hard running than people would have expected. It's completely different in that sense. Given we're talking about a team who used to, in big European games, some of the managers used to get really agitated over whether they'd press. But I think it's an interesting one in that sense. For all that the Newcastle crowd are going to be kind of expecting, to go at them in maybe classic kind of style, like when they played Barcelona, say, in 97, and Asprilla got that hat-trick. How is he's an interesting manager from the perspective of he's not very emotion-led in that sense. He's never been one to kind of really kind of sync up with the crowd is doing, and he'll basically do what he feels is tactically necessary. And from that perspective, I think all of Newcastle's group games, maybe bar Dortmund at home, I think he'll play as he did against Milan, which is really constrained, really tight, and try and limit this. And it's why basically I'm going for under 2.5 goals, because I think this is going to be a very tactical game and actually quite a contrast in style. Given we'll know Luis Enrique is trying to implement, a more intense version of the Spanish Barcelona principles, and I think this will be a classic counter-attacking approach.
Yeah, find it hard to disagree with any of that, particularly how the game might go under 2.5 goals. Seems quite a good price there, around 2.4. Mark, are you in agreement with how that game's going to go in terms of how Newcastle's set up, and is that ultimately key to deciding which way this game will go?
Possibly. I guess first I just want to say, keep fighting the good fight, Miguel. I think us kind of neutrals really appreciate your work from afar, really, to sort of raise awareness on these state-owned clubs. So big respect. I know you take a lot of crap from people for it, but well, especially the fans of those clubs. But we really appreciate it from afar. So good job. In terms of this match, obviously it's a huge occasion for Newcastle. The atmosphere will be sensational. But Eddie Howe was rallying the troops at the weekend in terms of the supporters, saying, really telling them how big a part they will have to play in midweek. But PSG are used to hostile atmospheres, so they're not going to be kind of put off by a noisy crowd at St James's. And in terms of Newcastle, they have to be so much better than they were in Milan, because they were dreadful. I thought Nick Pope was easily man of the match, helped them getting a 0-0 draw in that game, and they need significant improvement. However, there are key injuries to perhaps their first choice 11. If you look down their spine, probably three key members are missing here. Botman, who's been by far and away their best defender, Joelinton and Wilson. And I think, whilst you got Isak to go in and lead the line, he's got a great skill set. I love him as a player. He doesn't provide the same kind of physicality that I think a Wilson would. He could ruffle feathers in a way which I don't think Isak can. And also, without Joelinton, you've probably got the prospect of Tonali and Guimaraes operating in a midfield three again. And at the minute, I just don't think the balance is right. Two of them seem to be trying to do each other's jobs all the time. So defensively, they have improved. We've sort of talked about their 4 clean sheet record for a while, but it's now 5 clean sheets on the spin. But you have to sort of assume that PSG will break that run. Luis Enrique said the performance against Dortmund was as close to perfection as it could be. Clearly, they have had vulnerabilities on their travels in Europe down previous campaigns. But if you look at the teams who have actually beaten PSG away from home in this competition over the last 10 years, Chelsea, Barcelona, Liverpool, Real Madrid, Man City, Bayern, Dortmund, Leipzig, they don't often lose to teams outside the real elite. And sure, you could say Dortmund and Leipzig could be packaged alongside Newcastle there. And there is danger in this match. But still seeing Newcastle favourites to beat PSG doesn't sit right with me, and I have to oppose that price on Newcastle. We know why they're heavily rated, because they're a Premier League side. Their underlying numbers domestically are very strong too, but it doesn't sort of always translate into points. And you can look at PSG's domestic record so far this season, especially the weekend result at Clermont when they failed to win, a 0-0 draw. They did still have 10 shots on target, over 3 expected goals, 5 big chances missed. It's very rare you see the likes of Mbappe, Mouane and Dembele sort of failing to fire in 2 matches running. So, you've got Ramos off the bench. You've got Hakimi just bombarding down that right-hand flank against Dan Burn alongside Dembele. That's a mismatch. The defensive structure they now have with Donnarumma, Marquinhos, Skriniar, Ugarte, Luka Hernandez, I think they're more than good enough to get something out of this game. They're not going to be kind of put off by the atmosphere. So for me, the bet is to back PSG with a quarter goal start at 175, I think it is. You get paid if they avoid defeat, and I think they're more than capable of doing so.
Okay. Yeah, pro PSG show for Mark O'Hare. So yeah, Adrian, look, I agree with Miguel. I think Newcastle set up very defensively, but Mark makes some good points that maybe if we look at those 2 starting 11s come 7 o'clock an hour before kickoff, that maybe PSG are just the better side and will ultimately win the game.
Yeah, that's the way I see it. I'm very much along the same lines as Mark, really. Just got to look at the forwards, Kolo Muani, Mbappe, Dembele, Ramos, etc. They've got a lot of quality, but they've also got a lot of experience and, nous at European level. And it's different. We saw Brighton lose to Athens, really strong Brighton team. European football is different. And, Milan should have put Newcastle out of sight in the San Siro. They're very reliant on the goalkeeper. And Mark's right to bring up Botman and Joelinton for me, because, down the spine of the pitch, they're two must picks. Callum Wilson might have been on the bench. It's him or Isak often, isn't it? And it certainly would have been for this game. But those 2 players missing, I think could be quite costly if indeed they are. So yeah, look, they're unbeaten away in all competitions, PSG, since March when they lost to Bayern. So, even though they have not always been winning these games, they don't get beaten too often. Enrique is a smart coach as well. One thing I will say about PSG and why I want to pair it with over 1.5 goals is, and this is remarkable, they've conceded in their last 13 away games in the Champions League. October 2020 was the last clean sheet on the road for PSG in Europe. So Newcastle might be worth a goal here, but I can absolutely see, and I know Newcastle, they're not bad defensively, but I can absolutely see Dembele and Mbappe having not a field day, but causing a lot of problems here. This could be it could be chasing it actually for them if PSG get their tails up. Look, Newcastle being favourites, I can't get my head around that. Just can't. Not when you look at the players. They've also lost to City this season. They've lost to Brighton. They've lost to Liverpool. Their record against the top 5 in the Premier League last season was 1-1, drew 3, lost 4. It's not as if they're beating the best teams on a regular basis. So yeah, for me, I'm really surprised at the odds. And I have to go with PSG, and I'm going to go with over 1.5 because I can't guarantee they'll keep a clean sheet.
Okay, PSG and over 1.5 goals. The selection for Adrian 3.3. We'll lock in the saver pick PSG plus a quarter goal head start 178, effectively taking on Newcastle as favourites. And Miguel's expecting a tense game, and Newcastle do a good enough job under 2.5 goals, 2.4. So plenty of options there in what should be the game of the week or the game of the match day. We will go to the 4th game. Same game in that group. I think we're 4-0 so far for picking games as the marquee games from this group. So again, we make no apology for it. It's a fascinating group and should get even more fascinating if Newcastle get a result. But it's Dortmund 2.48, Milan 3.0. The draw is 3.7. Both teams to score, yes, again, heavily favoured, yes, 1.67. The Asian handicap line sees Milan get a quarter of a goal head start at 1.85, and the goal line is over 2.5 and that's 181 is the favourites in that market. So, Mark, there's going to be disagreement with the three selections here, so there's going to be a good bit of debate, no more group thinking. Milan, for you, I'm taking you were very impressed with them, not just this season, but that performance against Newcastle match day 1. They did everything but win the game.
They did. They absolutely dominated that fixture, not just with the eye test, but with the underlying numbers as well. If you look at the shot count, they won it 25-6. They had 9 shots on target, 4 big chances, and 2 non-penalty expected goals. They clearly need to be a little bit more clinical in front of goal, but I think they did enough good business in the summer to suggest there's more than enough quality across the board, really, to make an impact in this competition. Pulisic scoring at the weekend. You got Okafor as well. Rafael Leao is fit and available and in good form as too. You got Giroud leading the line. They've got Chukwueze, loads of different options going forward. Defensively, they're okay. They're all right. And I just back Pioli's kind of craft, his intelligence, his game plan, and just the Champions League experience that Milan have got at the minute to go to Dortmund and get something. It's not the most intimidating place right now. I've been quite forthright with my Dortmund views already this season. I still believe that last year's scars are going to take even longer to heal. I still think Bellingham's departure is such a huge blow on and off the pitch. I still think there's quite understandable scrutiny of Edin Terzic and his coaching ability. Is he the right character to take this club forward? I know the results domestically have been quite positive, but actually, if you look at the performances, they haven't been great. The schedule's been quite kind as well. And look, they're coming out fighting in the press and sort of talking about how they've accumulated more points and scored more goals at the same stage 12 years ago and 12 months ago. And they went very close for the title last year. But the eye test and every time you watch them, it just paints a different story. Even on Friday night, they beat Hoffenheim away. They started brilliantly. They scored a great goal. Then just did a brain dead thing again to concede. And the game was in the balance for a lot of that match against Hoffenheim. They scored 3 goals. They only had 6 shots in the game. And, defensively, they're just weak, vulnerable, and it doesn't match up well to me, really. So they're a weaker team than they were 12 months ago. And I would say that Milan are probably just as good as they were 12 months ago, if not slightly better. So they've had one big hiccup this year, which came in the derby against Inter. They almost always fail to fire against Inter under Simone Inzaghi. At the weekend, they were very good in dispatching Lazio, only allowed 3 shots in the box in that game. So Dortmund haven't convinced me at all. I have massive doubts about them. Milan, I wouldn't say do convince me, but I think they've seen more than enough from Milan to suggest that they can get something out of this match. So Milan plus a quarter would be my selection at 183. You just make money if they avoid defeat. I think they're more than good enough to do that.
Okay, and Adrian, you essentially fundamentally disagree with Mark O'Hare.
How am I going to form an argument against that? Look, Martin has probably watched the performances more than I've had time to, if I'm being perfectly honest. But at home, Borussia Dortmund are unbeaten in over a year. Now, Manchester United were unbeaten in over a year, and they're not all that. Yeah. But their record since their last defeat, which was August 2022, is 1-15, drawn 3, lost none at their home pitch. That gives them confidence. So, and I don't think Milan are that great. Yeah, they bossed the game against Newcastle, should have scored, but they didn't. Giroud's still leading the line. I do rate Leao. I think he's a really good player, but Pulisic, who couldn't get in at Chelsea, is a big player for them. I don't think they're that outstanding. I know that the points are racking up in Serie A and that they're doing pretty well, but you've got Loftus-Cheek as a regular now, Tomori as a regular in the side. I just look at some of the names and I think that I don't see them getting to the semi-finals again this time around. I just couldn't see this team doing that. But look, we'll have to wait and see. My pick here is primarily based on the fact that Dortmund have punch at the top end of the pitch. I know they can concede goals, but they do tend to score a lot, multiple goals at home most of the time, and they haven't been beaten on their own patch in over a year. And I think they're capable of beating Milan. So yeah, that and at the price, I find that quite attractive for a home team in the Champions League, and what effectively looks quite an even match.
Okay, yeah. So it's Milan's underlying numbers, perhaps, Miguel, against the Dortmund's home record. So I guess maybe just back goals and essentially back both of these teams.
Yeah, it feels like that, and especially because it's Dortmund at home, and especially because of that vulnerability. Really, I suppose maybe the third way here. I take both of the lads' points in that. I agree with Mark. I don't think Dortmund have been convincing at all. I think there's obviously two major factors. That one is how last season ended. Two is, I mean, they've lost the star we've already spoken about, and as well as a few other factors that have come together. But again, it's a home game at a team that, in that sort of Champions League atmosphere, will kind of amplify their more attacking elements. We saw it in the Chelsea game last season when against Potter's Chelsea, which was actually one of the most remarkable games of the Champions League campaign, given how it went back and forth. This, okay, it's not a knockout, but the fact it's such a kind of a tight group means it could go similar. It's obviously the standout group of the calendar, given how similar in level all four clubs are, and I think that could feed into it. So yeah, for me, and I mean beyond that Inter game, I have actually been impressed, man. I thought they were brilliant against Newcastle, and really they shouldn't have just won that game, but they could have won it quite convincingly. And I think all those factors will come together. I think this will be there'll be a fair few goals in this. So over 2.5 seems actually relatively safe.
Yeah, I'm inclined to go with the goals here. Essentially sitting on the fence here, over 2.5, 181. So, but fascinating to see how that game goes. Dortmund against Milan. I think Marco Reus was filling in the last few minutes at CDM over the weekend when they were down to 10 men. So look, maybe might see a ball playing CDM coming from that here. Who knows? He's been in the wrong position all these years. But we will go to any other bets in our section. So with full recap of any of the bets we put up already, insights.matchbook.com from Monday afternoon. We're going to go to any other bets and one selection each from the guys. So we will start with Adrian in this pick here. So this is your first any other bet.
Yeah, I'm dipping my toe into the Europa League, actually.
Yes. First of the season.
I like the look of this. I like the look of Bayer Leverkusen. Obviously, they're top of the Bundesliga, absolutely flying. It's all to do with Granit Xhaka, of course. So yeah, it's
correct.
Is that the right answer?
Correct.
No, but look, they're scoring so many goals, aren't they, at the moment? Absolutely buzzing. They've scored at least 2 in all 7 of their games so far in all competitions. A total of 24 goals scored across those 7 games, so over 3 per game. Against largely domestic opponents. Aside from the game they had in the Europa group stage previously, which they won convincingly. Look, they've got strikers in form, Victor Boniface and Jonas Hoffmann in decent nick. And look, this is Mulder. This is not a club with rich European pedigree. They don't have a great history of turning over European giants, not even on home turf. I believe this is a grass pitch as well. Often with the Scandinavian teams, I get a little bit twitchy if you see it's an artificial surface, because I think that can impact it. But I believe Mulder have grass. So again, that plays into the hands of Leverkusen. I just think that I can get them onside to win the game, which I think most people would expect them to win. And to get over 2.5 goals. Mulder tend to score quite a lot, actually. Lost 3-2 at home to Galatasaray in the Champions League qualifier. I can see Leverkusen racking up their usual 2 or 3. Maybe Mulder might get one themselves. So yeah, that's how I see it. By Leverkusen and over 2.5, it's pretty much even money.
Yeah, even money seems quite big. Just looked at the 7 or 8 results this season by Leverkusen. A lot of goals, Adrian, as you alluded to. So seems very good price there in the Europa League. Mark, we'll head to you. So, look, Barcelona were impressed a lot of people on Matchday 1, but you're taking them on.
Yeah, well, I kind of got 2 angles for this game in Porto. I put Barcelona up on the podcast, the weekend podcast, a couple of weeks back to overcome a handicap against Celta Vigo. That was on the back of thrashing Antwerp and Betis 5-0 in consecutive games. Yeah. They haven't been anywhere near as slick or dominant since then. They were really fortunate to escape that game with a 3-2 win. They were trailing 2-0 when Celta took off Iago Aspas and things fell apart in the final 20 minutes without him. But throughout that match, they looked all at sea defensively. And then they went to Mallorca and they were held 2-2. Again, defensively, they looked like a complete rabble at times. They were sort of turned over on the shots on target count. Mallorca landed 7 penalties and 7 corners in that game, and carved out a couple of big opportunities outside of the 2 goals they scored. Then on Friday night, you watched them against Sevilla. They were the better team, only slightly, really. Deserved to win the game, but the goal came via a Ramos own goal. So at the minute, there's no De Jong and there's no Pedri, and that's putting huge pressure on the defence because Romeo hasn't really moved into that role, defensive midfield role, since he's arrived and hasn't looked great there. So they're getting totally overrun and they look far too easy to play against. And look, Ter Stegen was exceptional last season, but he's finding it hard to reach those standards again because the standards were so high. It's hard to kind of continue them over and over again. So Barcelona are conceding goals, and I think Porto will look at this game as an opportunity to pick up something. On Friday night, they had the Clasico against Benfica. They're absolutely seething after that because of the injustice of an early red card, which looked really, really harsh, which contributed massively to their 1-0 defeat. Conceição was absolutely furious, looked like he was ready to explode on the sidelines. So they're going to be absolutely pumped to set the record straight. The Dragao is one of the famous European stadiums on Champions League nights. I just think they can play a little bit above the odds, and seeing Barcelona odds on to win away here felt short. Leverkusen and Atletico were both beaten at the Dragao last season. Inter were held, and Barcelona's away record in this competition hasn't always stood up, really, especially since sort of they started winning the competition. But their victories away from home in the Champions League tend to be against pot 3, pot 4 sides. So I think it's a big ask for them to go to Porto and get a win. Odds on quotes, so you can get Porto plus half a goal at 2.04. I think that's absolutely fine. Also would look towards the BTTS and over 2.5 goals option as well, around about evens. Barca's last 3 away games in La Liga produced 14 goals from trips to Mallorca, Villarreal and Osasuna. So fully anticipate Porto scoring in this game, but Barca have got some exceptional firepower at their disposal, but defensively they're looking quite weak at the minute. So should be a good watch. Expect goals for both teams, but I think Barca are too short and I think goals are underrated.
Okay, Porto plus half a goal at 2.02, the selection there for Mark. Miguel, you have a selection here in your any other bets that leads into your best long shots. So take it away on Lens versus
go straight from one to the other, will I?
Yeah, straight back to back. Let producer Ryan worry about everything else with banners wise. But a little bit on Arsenal this season, what Arteta's trying to do, I guess, in terms of maybe challenging Man City this year.
I mean, there's been a lot of focus on Havertz, obviously, who got his first goal with a penalty at the weekend. I suppose people might say penalty's cheap, but he did have the imagine it went wrong, so he does the bravery to step up in that sense. And yeah, the psychological effect will probably help as well. But obviously, I mean, I think what's happening with Arsenal has been quite interesting, and the Champions League actually performance against PSV falls into this. And what next? Because obviously, what happened last year was Arsenal's main first 11 really clicked, and that propelled them on that amazing run. The issue then, like the bind they got into towards the end of the season, was either you can stick with the first 11 and inevitably they'll get fatigued, or you can change the first 11 and while the team is fresher, it just doesn't function in the same way. And like he ended up, I suppose, going for a bit of both. And I think it was somewhat inevitable that he just trailed off. And actually getting over 80 points in the way he did, given where they were at that point, was really impressive. Even if the ending takes away from that. But I think it's quite clear from the start of this season, from what I've heard, that the signings that Arteta has made, and Havertz is, I think, a complete example of this, are to give the team more tactical variety and options so they don't have that issue this season. Of course, trying to accommodate that and trying to allow it means there's a little bit of a drop-off maybe at the start of this season, which is why they haven't been that convincing all the time. Although the weekend was impressive and the PSV game was impressive. Now, the PSV game probably has to be put in the context of Peter Bosch and that sort of football away from home. But also, I think Arsenal have got, for a first Champions League group in 6 years or 7 years, they've got really fortunate here. I mean, PSV, we've seen what happens. And ultimately, it's sad to say, but Dutch football is kind of second, almost third tier now. Sevilla, who they've also got in the group, are having just a dismal season, or they're in a kind of a dismal situation more so. And Lens also, who did so well to qualify for the Champions League this year, well, they're in a relegation zone in France, and having also lost a lot of key figures, say, to Nice. And all of it, I mean, Arsenal, if they want, they could probably get 18 points out of this group. But in typical fashion, if they get to 12, they'll probably kind of rest players. But all that feeding into this game against Lens, like I think just the way it's set up, it's difficult not to see just one of those easy kind of 3-0, 3-1 wins. So that's why I think a good bet is over 2.5. Over 2.5 goals in this game, potentially all from Arsenal. And that's why my long shot, I'm going for a very specific Arsenal 3-0 win.
Okay, we're in around 15.5 at the moment on Matchbook Betting Exchange, so do check out those correct score markets. And over 2.5 goals is around 1.9 currently as well. So we'll have a quick look at the long shots record. I'm trying to remember the long shot. I'm pretty sure it was Mark in week 1. It was Lazio 1, Atletico 1, 7.0. Got us off to a great start. £20 stake on every long shot so far will leave you plus 77 pounds 60 pence up based on a £20 stake, as I said, and including 2% commission. So, Adrian, there's been a couple of, one comment I saw in particular. Is there no one quite leaning towards Galatasaray on the Asian handicap markets? Well, you're going one better on the long shots. This did jump off the page when I saw this, and I did have a little smirk to myself going, I'm looking forward to Adrian making the case here for Galatasaray at Old Trafford, 7.8.
Yeah, look, I definitely will show a bit of love for Galatasaray. It's fun to oppose Manchester United at the moment if you're not a Manchester United fan. Obviously, losing to Brighton like they did, and then to Crystal Palace, it's difficult times off the pitch. I do think there are issues there, and that dressing room isn't a good dressing room. I don't think there's any debate about that. There's too many leaks, too many stories, too many incidents involving players at Manchester United for you to think anything else. It's a bad dressing room, and Erik ten Hag has got his work cut out, and he's under pressure, isn't he? Coming into this game, and if you look at the price of Galatasaray in a 2-horse race, they appeal big time because if Manchester United can conspire to lose, to Palace, they can definitely lose to Galatasaray. So because the mood. Can you imagine the mood if Galatasaray were to open the scoring here? It could get quite poisonous, I think, at Old Trafford. So yeah, they've got a chance. They are underdogs for a reason. They're not as strong player for player, but Galatasaray have talent. I mean, you look around the squad, you've got Mauro Icardi up front. He's always worth a goal. If chances fall his way, he's pretty lethal. Wilfried Zaha, who's kind of got a point to prove, you've got to say, after his time at Manchester United. He would love to shine on his return to these shores. But you look around the squad. I mean, Lucas Torreira's in there, Davinson Sanchez, and Ndombele, Dries Mertens, Hakim Ziyech. A few Turkish players you'd recognise, Dervisoglu, Yilmaz, the goalie, Muslera. Very, very experienced. You've got a lot of big time players that are used to playing in big games. So I don't think Galatasaray will be the least bit phased by facing United away. And if I were them, I would absolutely go for it in the first 15, 20 minutes to try and get their nose in front and to get that poisonous atmosphere to the fore. And if they did have got a chance of winning the game, in terms of long shots, this leapt off the page to me.
Okay, yeah. A massive game in that group already at Old Trafford. So it's Galatasaray, the best long shot of the week for Adrian Clarke, 7.8 currently on Matchbook. And Mark, take away with the other group, or the other game from the Napoli Real Madrid group, and that's you're fancying Braga to get a result here away to Union Berlin, who were quite impressive against Madrid right up to the last few minutes.
I didn't think they were, to be honest. I thought they were quite fortunate to be in that game until the last minute, really. They got battered for the most part. So they are making their Champions League debut, and this will be their first home game, but it's not taking place in their usual stadium in Köpenick because they've moved it to the Olympic Stadium, as they will be playing in all their Champions League matches. So they've sold out all their Champions League season tickets. So you will get a cracking atmosphere, but it's not quite the same as Union playing in Köpenick. And their season has escalated pretty much out of control a little bit, actually, recently. They started the season with 2 4-1 wins, but they've now since lost 5 matches on the spin in September, and they scored just 1 goal. On Saturday, I watched them lose 1-0 at Heidenheim when I was backing goals. They generated almost 3 expected goals in that game, but weren't able to hit the back of the net, and they were similarly kind of misfiring against Hoffenheim and Wolfsburg recently too, and their captain, Christopher Trimmel, basically blamed a lack of self-confidence, very much pointed towards the forwards in that sense. So they need to improve in the final third, but they are creating opportunities, and that gives me faith to suggest that they can get on the score sheet here. But they just look too short, really, at sort of evens or even sub-even money to beat Braga, who competed really well against Napoli on Matchday 1, had 16 shots in that match, lost the game 2-1, had 12 shots in the box against Napoli, and they have recovered themselves from a rocky start. They've turned out 4-1 and 4-2 wins in the last 2 games. A couple of key players in good form. They've just been great fun to follow, really. The domestic matches are averaging well over 4 goals per game. They've scored 12 times in 4 away days. And I know the competition is weaker in Portugal than it is in the Bundesliga, but they will attack this game with confidence. And I think they could pick up a surprise result here. I just think they're a bit too big at 4.3. And when you include both teams to score, which has landed in all 8 of Braga's games home and in Europe so far this season, it almost doubles, better than doubles the price. You're getting 9.0 on Braga to win and BTTS. Just far too big, really. I just think there's concerns around Union Berlin at the minute, and Urs Fischer, he's never lost 5 consecutive games in charge of the club. So they're in the doldrums a little bit at the minute, but I think they can. Well, both teams will see this as a very important match in the group, with Napoli and Real Madrid also in it. So I'm expecting it to be open and exciting, and I think Braga could potentially edge it.
Okay, yeah. So Braga and both teams score 9.0, the best long shot, and you can find that on the Matchbook Betting Exchange. We'll invariably be best priced, particularly on those markets versus our UK competitors, the sports books. And Mark, we're staying here for your best bet as well. So it's linked to this selection here, but you're just looking at both teams to score as a safer option for your best bet on the card.
Yeah, I like it at 1.89. Both teams lost their first games. Both teams are expected to sort of battle it out for third in this group, so they'll be targeting this as must win. Braga should bring the noise in terms of their attack, and Union may get a bit more freedom this time around. They've been struggling to kind of break down deep defences. They've been sort of asked to dictate the rhythm and dominate possession, which hasn't been their forte under Urs Fischer, but Braga will attack them and leave spaces. So Union are masters from set piece situations, but they'll enjoy the opportunity to play in transitions too. So I think Union can score. They'll be roared on by 70,000 home fans. But Braga, as I've said, BTTS has landed in all 8 of their league and Champions League matches so far this season. So to get 1.89 on the repeat just feels a nice price in the early kickoff on Tuesday.
Okay, yeah, early kickoff again, as Mark alluded to. Don't miss that 5:45 Tuesday, so be quick, depending when you're listening to this podcast. Miguel, best bet here, and look, we covered this earlier on, but you are expecting Newcastle to be able to sit in and frustrate PSG at St James's Park.
Yeah, I just think Howe's approach maybe dictate the game more than PSG's season, which, as we've seen, has had a lot of goals. And because it's a European game in this sort of group. Yeah, I just can't get away from that. And I think under 2, given that price, well, maybe it's that price because of PSG's season, but just because of a few factors, that's what's guiding my mindset here.
Okay, 2.4 under 2.5 goals, Newcastle versus PSG, and we have seen goal lines go a lot more towards the over this season, so maybe taking that on in the unders is a good play. Adrian, final word to you on a sensational Asian handicap line here. So I'll say no more and let you take it away. It's one of the biggest I've seen.
Yeah, it's a bit controversial. I mean, taking on, as a best bet to take on the might of Bayern Munich. But look, you've got to be in it to win it, haven't you? And there is a reason why I've gone for this. You have to go all the way back, and I've spent a bit of time looking at this, to go all the way back to 2004 for the last time Copenhagen lost a home match in the Champions League by more than 2 goals. It's a run of 43 games. And in that run, there's been a few qualifiers in there. They've not all been giants of the game, but teams like Juventus, Real Madrid, Barcelona, Chelsea, and Manchester United have all gone there, haven't all won. And they're certainly not won by more than 2 goals. In last season, Copenhagen drew with Sevilla, City, and Dortmund on their own patch. They like it. It's a nice stadium. It's packed out. It's a good atmosphere. And no matter, who they're up against, they tend to be competitive. And Bayern are flawed, aren't they? They're not a brilliant side. Obviously, Kane's flying and you've got Musiala. You've got so much talent there. They can always score goals. But for me, they're not perfect at the moment. And you can always see them conceding a goal. They've conceded, plenty already in the current campaign. And of course, if Copenhagen get on the score sheet, then Bayern will need 4 for us to lose our stake. So it's a nice handicap, isn't it? Knowing that the other team needs to win by 3 goals for you to lose your money. Bayern, of course, they're capable of going anywhere in the world, really, and turning over the opposition. But the history books and 43 games tell you that it doesn't happen to Copenhagen very often at all. They can make a game of it against Bayern Munich, and I'm backing them to do it.
Okay, Copenhagen plus 2.0/2.5, which you'll find the matchup betting exchange is plus 2.25. So half your stake and plus 2, half your stake and plus 2.5. 1.73 versus Bayern Munich. Okay, interesting, fascinating best bets, guys. Thanks as Mill as always. It's a 3-week break to the next Champions League between the next international break coming up here. But my thanks to Mark, Adrian, Miguel. Mark and Adrian will be back on Thursday to review the final domestic action before the international break. Until then, enjoy the break. Check out insights.matchbook.com if you want a full recap. We will chat to you on Thursday. Otherwise, take care.